Thank you everybody for coming to my session about tailoring metrics that matter with Quarkus. As probably you've read in the description of the talk, I'm Ana and I'm happy to be here with you. I'm Java champion, the first Java champion from Romania, and working day by day as an architect at IBM. Together with Victor, we are putting some good work for the Bucharest software craftsmanship community as well. And we are happy to host so many people there coming to the events that are happening there, and hope that those help you to improve your skills in terms of making your software better. Also like to mention that besides being Java at core, I have evolved a bit to understand how architectures are working. So I began to be closer to the DevOps side as well, because I want to understand the DevOps mindset and I want to know how that works and how can I work with that. So this is why I like also Kubernetes, and I certified the second passion of mine with some certifications like the OpenShift one or the Linux Foundations one. What can I say? I like Kubernetes. It is cool, but I know that probably there are not many fans among the developers. As an architect, I can say that there is place both for the apps and both for the operations in this world, and you couldn't go one without another. So the topic of today, metrics. Sounds a little bit boring, right? But the thing is that if you would be notified by somebody in your team that, well, let's say every night, your application, every night at like 1 or 3 a.m. in the morning when you're sleeping nicely, because you're working regular hours and like 9 to 5, but your app at 1 a.m. or 3 a.m., well, it has a spike in the throughput scene. So there's a lot there, and a lot of activity on your app. And this kind of happens like a pattern from time to time. And of course, the performance of the app is decreasing. So then you're kind of thinking like, why is this happening? So you need to know why is this happening? And this is why you have metrics. Metrics are there to help you so that you don't get a feedback like the app in that point and that path is really slow, or worse, is not available. Or these kind of things, and you to be like, oh, I don't know why that happened there. And as mentioned in the beginning, metrics are important for software architecture because you track how well you did with your software architecture and what is there to improve. So you're kind of basing that nice refactoring that probably Victor has already told you, and that nice code that you want to produce later on, based on metrics as well. So they can help you to get that refactoring from the business, for example, and to put better code there for your app. So let's talk about metrics that matter. Some metrics that matter. I already mentioned to you the throughput part. So being able to see the entire throughput, this can help us engineers to know how many servers should support that traffic. So this is very, very important. Like maybe you need to scale something in your app so that you can handle that much throughput. Secondly, there's something called queue time. So there are a few queues that developers should be acquainted with, and that is impacting actually application performance. Requests flowing to your app are actually flowing from load balancers most of the time. And you can have an external load balancer, internal load balancer, and this kind of cool stuff, and some proxies in between and some CDNs at some point in time. And you'll see that actually the request itself is not like you're working in your local host and it's just, okay, it's fast on my local host when I'm running on my local host. I don't understand why it's not as fast as this, as in my local host on the other. So queue time is important for us to know the amount of time background worker queues that are taking the request and you're doing some business there. So it's very important to pay attention also to that one as well. And last but not least, well, there is important to know the average response time. So average response time kind of gives you the information how your app is behaving and is responding to the users in average. And surprise, queue time actually is the multiplication between throughput and average response time. And that is given by Little's law. which is this algebraic expression that kind of gives you the information of how you could rework things to better support throughput and average response time, and of course improve your queue time as well. Now, very, very important for developers, and I probably you know them, you've seen them, they're errors. So for developers are very important three things, like HTTP percentage of errors. So you have to know how many times you're invocating your endpoints and your distributed system endpoints kind of retrieved errors. It can give you some starting points on what did not go so well inside your app or later on with what you're connecting and you're consuming. So these kind of metrics give you the overall impression about what did not work that well. And so error rates, and you can see, of course, how well it performed, because most of the time errors for users are translated in like people that didn't actually perform what they wanted to perform in your application. Then there are logged exceptions. So you should keep an eye on the rates of the logged exceptions. I mean, it's good that you log them. You shouldn't eat them, by the way, like, I'm referring to eating them, like, just catching them, not logging anything, and never know what happened there. Just doing that is not a good practice, and it will not benefit you when situations when you're wondering what happened occur. And secondly, you should monitor the rate of thrown exceptions. I mean, the number of exceptions that have been thrown. We should not be afraid of throwing exceptions, even with our apps, because we need to signal those situations that are exceptional, that are not on the happy path scenario, or that are not envisioned in the scenarios that were developed. And of course, you should be aware about metrics that measure the amount of memory that you're using. So when I'm talking about memory, probably you notice that different languages are allocating and are cleaning up memory differently. And not only the languages, but of course, the algorithms that you employ are helping there. So knowing how your memory, how allocation and garbage collection works with your memory is really important and essential for scaling most of the time. And now, why Quarkus? And I was ready to ask about Quarkus, but I wanted to keep this for the slide. So why Quarkus? First of all, for the developer experience, I personally like the live reload, like coding in my IDE, reloading in the browser, and that's it. So just sitting there and no need to restart any server. So this is a huge improvement from my point of view. Secondly, if you're already acquainted probably with JPA and Hibernate object relational mapping, well, you will like very much using Panache. And Panache is actually on top of JPA and Hibernate ORM to help you to simplify the model that you are working with your queries and with Hibernate overall. Of course, Quarkus supports both reactive and imperative models. So this is very important for people and folks that already are really keen on doing reactive applications. And of course, Spring. There's Spring in Quarkus. So if you really like Spring, and I also like Spring, and there are a few cool things from Spring that probably I would like to have in some of my applications. So for example, like Spring Dependency Injection, Spring Web, Spring Data GPA, they're compatible with Quarkus. And pretty much, if you're more comfortable with doing them in Spring, but getting also some things from Quarkus, that is possible with the Quarkus Spring API. So these are like pre-optimized extensions. So Quarkus is using pre-optimized extensions, and they're made so that Quarkus can deliver an amazing amount of functionality for microservices development. So you're not sticking just to this framework. You can extend yourself also to the Spring part. And of course, early detection of dependency injection errors. Quarkus is catching dependency injection errors during compilation instead of runtime, and that's a plus. But those being said, I know we're all devs here probably, and for us, seeing things is better than just me telling you the nice stories behind it. So let me start with our demo. First of all, for my demo today, I used, not this one, but this one, code.quarkus.io. I generated the code from here. I'm using Java 11 for this one. And there are a bunch of extensions, as mentioned before, available. So you just just select them and whatever you need. Some are experimental, some are in preview, so probably they're going to be like fully general available at some later point in time. But things are moving really fast in this landscape, and they're getting promoted really, really often. So it's not a problem there. And you can experiment with a big range of extensions. You just generate your code. You can have some sample code. I also had my sample code, so you're going to see that my code is actually an enhancement of the sample code. But if you don't like the sample code, you can also choose like, no, I don't want sample code, and then you can download as a zip, push to GitHub, or you can share further this app. So this is pretty cool. And now let's go to my app. So I said how to have a simple app, and I reworked a bit the example endpoint to make it a little bit more complex for what I want to show you today. And yes, I'm having just one entity. And I've also used Lombok just to get rid of those getters and those setters. And pretty much I kept everything simple for the demo purposes. And just going to work with it to see how I'm going to measure a few things with my app. Now, one thing that you should know about my app is that this app is deployed in multiple regions. So it can happen many times that the same microservice, to you might be the same code, is deployed in different regions, and through environment variables and of course through some very nice manipulations at the level of Kubernetes objects, you can connect them to different endpoints. Of course, environment variables and config maps and so on, you can connect those microservices to different endpoints based on that region. And this can happen really often because probably you've already noticed that regulations and rules and laws across countries, even in Europe, they vary. And you need to be up to date with those, and you need just to scale for that specific country, for example, or that specific region. So those being said, you need sometimes to get metrics about how the same code is behaving across multiple regions. So in case you need to get metrics how the same code behaves across multiple regions, you can get them by making some global text configuration. And I have here my class called global text configuration. And let me find my application.properties and split it to the right, because it's actually my source of values. So my values are going to be populated from this part here, from the global part. And I'm just going to fill them in for sake of purpose. I'm just going to complete them. And that's it for the moment. Now, the magic to auto-complete them, and probably some of you already know Spring and know the add value annotation and so on. What you can do here is actually use the add config properties and just inject these by using prefix. And in my case, the prefix is global. So when I'm going to start my app, it's going to pick them up. All these global parts are going to be taken into account, and everything's going to be considered like there is no difference between them, and just pick them up from here. And that's a really cool thing to populate your variables. And you can see here that region and custom meter, they can be defined also from the environment, and they have a default value. So this means that I can control this from Docker, or I can control this from Kubernetes as well, and just inject the value here. And it's good to separate sometimes what is parameterizable from the environments through the actual code. Now, this is what gives you the properties. But there is something more that you need to do. Let's make this custom configuration available. So in order to make this custom configuration available, you need to make your own meta filters and make it available. So what you can do in the part with the custom configuration, you can produce a new meta filter configuration for all of your registries. Meta filter. Configure, sorry. My computer is a little bit slower sometimes when I'm sharing my screen. Configure tags for all. Okay. Come on, don't be that slow with me. Okay, so I'm going to, of course, return a meta filter. And I'm going to say common tags. Now I'm going to use my global tags config that I used before. So I want to gather some overall information how my application is behaving across region. So I'm going to give a list of tags here. And I'm going to say tag.off. My key is the one that I defined earlier in global tags config, and it's going to be, actually, let me start with the region because I talked about it, and afterwards about profile. So it's going to be region. So this is just the name. My tag key is region, and the value is, of course, the one that is going to be parameterizable from the environment. So it's going to be tags config dot region. And then just to change it a little bit, of course, my second tag is about profile. So I want to know how my app is behaving in different profiles. So if you need to know like how many resources you should allocate for different for your app running in different environments, because you don't need to provision all your environments the same, as that would cost too much. You can use this part of the profiling and profile and see the differences between how much it consumes with these type of flags of global flags. So you say profile manager, that's given by Quarkus. I don't need to, inject it and make it myself. It's just going to take the active profile and populate it here. So pretty much we make the custom configuration, make the global tags config. Now, let's move a little bit further and actually use these tags, because for the tags to be, properly used, they need to be employed somewhere in your code. And the first stop in my case is going to be the part where I am handling the connection to the database. So you can see here that I already annotated a few things with that counted. So it counted when I want to count the actual invocations to a specific query in my database. So this is where I can trace how many of those invocations were done there. But there are cases when you have joins or have complicated stuff that you are complicated queries that sometimes can take longer, or they retrieve a lot of data. So filtering and searching, for example, can take longer. And in this case, what you can do is actually you can annotate with a timed annotation. Sorry about this one. Okay. And I'm going to give a value for it. So this is going to be the name for my timed. So I want to track the duration of things. Database.calls, and I'm going to say filter because this is what this function is doing, is filtering. I'm expecting for this to be running long. So I'm going to say long task true. So keep an eye on this one because it's going to take some time to run. And then I can give it some extra tags because by default, every annotation is coming with its own tags, but you can actually get more. You can put more of your tags so that you know to what particular part of your content it's related, so that you're not confused like, hey, what was there and what could I, annotate better. And I'm going to say here DB and language for the extra tag. And now looking at these, so there are a bunch of annotations more here. Like it counts the number of invocations, time. It is looking at the duration of stuff. So let's look up how to actually get the most of it together with what we configured earlier. So when you have metrics in your app, but of course you're gathering somewhere those metrics. You need some representation of those metrics. And for my registry, I'm using Prometheus, and I am just getting some nice charts at the level of Grafana. And I can employ the tags that I have defined together with the metrics I've defined to get more info that is helpful for me. So for example, in the case of the total queries, total find queries per region, it can give me interesting facts and about the amount of queries that happen to a certain amount of time per region. So it can give me that rate. And I can work with that rate here. If I wouldn't have customized this part, I wouldn't have had it by default. So it would have been just something bulk offered by my app, who's supervised by a few metrics like JVM metrics, which are enabled by default. This is kind of giving you more insights about the business logic that you actually have done for each of these regions. Then you can go a little bit more, and you can see the average filtering time for messages in English, or the greeting generator duration over time. So how was the greeting generation? So let me put this one for last hour to get some data. Yeah. So the average greeting generator duration over time. This is, I think, or the ad queries distribution. The ad queries distribution is actually looking again to something that I have to find from my database. It's looking to the count and gets the rate of the ad queries over time. These are really interesting facts to be known. When was the peak? What region generated the peak, and so on. So I'll put this up to 1 hour. Yeah, this is pretty much about the database. Now, we are preoccupied with what's going on when we are invoking the database, how much time it takes to make a certain invocation, or to see how many times it was invoked, just to not see like an increase of invocations. And we're always careful how often we're going to the database, right, as developers. So another important part for us as developers is, of course, our endpoints. And let's start with the simplest of the endpoints. I probably have seen this in many examples, like get me everything. Get me everything is the endpoint that you probably make first when you're starting, or even a POC, when you're starting development of something. Most of the time, it will not last there until the end, but it's something that you're trying to see and to see that you get some data, right? And what you can do in this case, when you're not interested in just getting the duration, but you're not interested to know about the distribution of the duration and so on, you can employ a microprofile annotation that is also working with Quarkus at Simply Timed. And the at Simply Timed can help you, is giving you the same information as a timed, without distribution of the info. Like if you don't need that, if you don't need to know if it's a long running task, then it's not important. And find all, it doesn't seem very like a task that would pose much difference. It's like just going straight forward and finding all the information for your app. So URI and API greet. So you can define your own tags, of course, on the simple time and get all this information. So one approach is that. Now, if you were looking to something more complex, and we had that filtering query that I annotated earlier with a timed, and we knew that filter query is going to be a long running one. That's why we put that long task running there to true. What we can do on filter metrics, we know that this one is probably going to be very used. So we want sometimes to track how are performing the concurrent invocations of the same endpoint. And for this part, I would recommend to use a concurrent gauge. Okay, the concurrent gauge pretty much tracking how your requests are performing in the same time. I mean, for multiple requests hitting the same endpoint in the same time, and this happens all the time for real applications, of course, is going on all the time because you have multiple users that use your app. You can add, of course, its own tags, but you notice that this one has something called language on the path. And for example, sometimes it's interesting for you to know how that performed per language. I mean, you know the overall performance at the endpoint, you get that. But you need to know how that performed when it was actually setting the response. So how it performed that well, and you want to be able to track that. And you can do that with a timer. So you can do that with the timer, micrometer timer. You just instantiate it, and it's fine, it's going to work. But the thing is that maybe you want to re-employ that logic. So this is why I created something I call the dynamic tag timer, which is pretty much looking for a timer in the registry based on an identifier and a tag name and tag value. So if this was already defined, nothing will happen. When the measurement is gonna go on, it's just going to increase that this type of metric was reached. So this should be the one who's looking over that part. But if, for example, a different tag value was given, then a new timer is being spun up. And I extracted it to a different class because I just wanted to reuse this logical class with multiple methods, and it's easier than just copy pasting code everywhere. So going to the example endpoint, what I can do now is use my dynamic tag timer that I instantiated above. Of course, I'm going to decorate it with the tag value. And in my case is language, because I want to track by this tag value by the language, and record of what is going on. So I want to record how the messages are going to be set after the invoking the message service filter messages by a locale. So this one is going to record for me, and it's going to detect how these requests are performing per language. And you can make this per language, and you can compare it with the overall behavior of the entire method. So this is really helpful for you when you need to compare what's going on inside with the overall picture. Now looking here, like average filtering time of messages in English. So for example, here, I've used this dynamic tag timer I had to make to see the average of the duration of requests. And I have here custom API greet in English, but it can be also Romanian. It can be also any other language. So it's not very difficult to customize it for your need. And sometimes you can make variables with your Grafana dashboard and just put the variable here and do not care. So this is useful when you want to track how that particular part of the code inside of your invocation has performed, report it to, and you can make, of course, a rate, and you can make a report of how this performed against the overall request. Going a little bit deeper into this part, we talked about, getting some greetings and getting some messages in different languages with different content. But let's look at how we create these. So in real life, most of the time when you receive a request in your app, you probably manipulate a little bit the data. Maybe you invoke some cache. Maybe you do some manipulations, or you have to have some extra cases that the business requires to take care of. I simulated them with the math.random part to see this how this part is going to work. So in this case, you would need to track this part too. But if you would need to track how generating requests by language and content are done, you would need to add a little bit more tags dynamically here. So the dynamic tag timer would not work in this case. But what you can do is actually multiply this logic for the dynamic multi-tag timer and add multiple tags to the same timer. So pretty much extending the existing logic and just make it available for multiple tags. Just going back here, and let's make some tags. Now this is a very special case, and I'm going to make another tag for this one just to tag the content here. So I'm going to make an exceptional tag. I'm just going to prefix it with exceptional. And of course, I'm going to append content. And of course, I'm going to use my dynamic multi-tag timer. Decorated with my tags. So first one is the language, and second one is the exceptional tag. And then I'm going to record what is going on. So I'm going to record this part. Okay, and we end it here. And then I'm going to make the invocation itself. So let me just check I didn't miss anything in my part. Oh, I need another one. Sorry. This is for the dynamic tag timer, but this is going to give me the duration of this. But I also want to see how the counts. So similar to dynamic multi-tag timer, I've created the dynamic multi-tag counter. which can help me to increment for the same tags that I'm using above. So for language and for exceptional tag. So this is the exceptional case. But I want to see and to measure the invocations that happen without these exceptional cases. So I can have an else, and I can just count them because I'm not interested in any duration. I mean, duration was important here because there was some logic that was taking time. But on the other case, I don't need to track that. So I'm going to increment by language, and I'm going to increment by content. Cool. And now that's my add method. Now my add method, if I'm looking to it, to the average greeting generator duration over time, I've used the metric I've defined before, my customized metric before, the greeting generator. And I've used it here to see how many of these were generated over time and see and compare across regions. And of course, now this is the profile of production, how those performed over time. And you can see that Benelux region has had the most greeting generated at some point in time, followed by UKI, and of course, CE performed a little bit lower. Going back, this is the part where you're just tracking the part with the long-running requests and seeing how they performed, and also how many of those invocations actually happened. But since I was talking about exceptions, we can see the sum by language of exceptional greetings. So the same part, it can help you to get how many requests happened for exceptional greetings. And remember my exceptional tag? Well, in Grafana, I can use that exceptional I defined there to actually make a small regular exception, regular expression, sorry, a small regular expression, and just get only those parts that are exceptional. So that kind of tag is helping me to identify how many times and there was an invocation of the exceptional logic and get me by a region when that happens. So in this case, the region I said here is CE, but I can just remove CE, or I can put any other region that I need there. So you can see that in CE, how were the exceptional greetings in different languages, and we can give you that kind of level of information. Now, the last part of the presentation regarding metrics, I want to introduce to you a metric that helps you to see how your events were distributed. So sometimes when you are when you have an endpoint for searching and you are implementing the search functionality, for example, you want to know how that performed, how those events of searching, that event of searching performed against the input you've given. So you want to track how that input performed with the response. What you can do is actually use a distribution summary. So in order to make a distribution summary, you would need a timer because that's going to look into the actual event, the duration of it. Sorry, timer dot start. And based on this one, let's instantiate a distribution summary, a builder, and I'm going to call this a distribution summary on search, because actually this is a search function and I want to know how the requests are performing on search functions. So I'm going to use on search dot requests, and then I will go to the part with the tag. Well, the tag is easy, it's going to be content, and with the value of the content. Now I want to know to scale up to 100 with the distribution summary, and I want to have some service level objectives like, I don't know, 50, 75, or 90. Typically, it's like service level objectives replace the SLAs that used to be before for this matter. And of course, I would like to probably use some histogram later on, so I want to publish this percentile histogram as well to Prometheus and reuse this information at the level of Grafana. And of course, I need to register this metric to the same registry so that I can use it coordinated with other metrics and get some more info. Then, of course, I'm just invoking the search and seeing how the search is going on. And of course, this is matching my request. But after this is happening, I need to stop my timer. I'm always writing it like this, sample. Come on, dot stop. And I need to retrieve my timer now. So I'm going to retrieve my timer from the registry by using the same logic that you saw in the dynamic tag timer and the dynamic multi-tag timer. So I'm going to say registry.timer by name. And because this timer is actually binded to my distribution summary, I know that it's going to be on search.requests, just appended.timer. And of course, I can identify it by tags as well, because it's using the same tags that I defined for my distribution summary. So it's going to have content and then content. And that's it. Now, distribution summaries, as I said, it helps you to get information about the distribution of your events and see how that happen. So, and sometimes you get this kind of thing, and you're going to find over the internet explained how the app deck score is working for users, and it gives you an information how your application was perceived by your users and how happy they are. So you can make your own app deck score with these buckets that are generated by the distribution summary. And this is just a very, very simple generated app deck score for each region. So you can compare the happiness across regions and how that happened, how those requests were checked across time. Wow, that was quite a journey. So I want to give you some takeaways besides the code that will be shared, of course. So first of all, it would be great to create your own global tags because they help you to trace how your application is performing and get some statistics for a certain region or for a certain profile. That can help you to improve your infrastructure and, of course, improve your code. Then use the counted annotation on top of the methods when you want to check the number of invocations. Or add the timed annotations when you have some long-running operations and those deserve a closer inspection. But if you just want to see the request duration and you're not preoccupied by anything else, you use the simply timed annotation, and that is going to work perfectly for you. Then you can follow the distribution of events and obtain their summary and make histograms with the distribution summary. This is a very important metric, and this can also help you when you're testing for performance, when you inspect for different caches. So just dig a little bit more about the distribution summary. There's really cool on using it. And of course, you can get more insights by dynamically adding more tags. So the same logic that I employed in different classes, like dynamic multi-tag timer, the dynamic tag timer. This kind of logic, like when you realize that you have some metrics that you are going to reuse, or some code that you're going to reuse with your metrics across your application, of course, is great to have those extracted at class level and keep them separately and just employ them whenever you need them and instantiate it per need. Because just copy pasting and not instantiating with a specific identifier can make your life a little bit more trickier. That was pretty much it from my side. Thank you very much for listening. The code can be found here along with the Grafana. It's in the JSON, so it's available for importing. Hope I didn't export it well, but I checked it. It should be fine. Also, there's setup.yaml that can help you to deploy to Kubernetes. And just one more thing to give you about the code. So you can install your Grafana and your Prometheus in local with operators. That's pretty easy, and you probably find that information in a lot of places on Google. And the setup.yaml, if you want to install the application across multiple regions like I did, just replace the ending here with the region of your choice, and it's going to be fine. Just deploy it afterwards. It's going to be really easy to work with it. Because I am using services that are of type load balancer, and you're not, having the chance to reuse the same port or overwrite things or get into conflicts. So that was pretty much it from my side. Let me go back to the code.
Anna, thank you very much. Big round of applause for Anna. Can you hear the crowd? Saying, yes. Thank you so much.
Okay. That was quite a run. I was worried about the timing.
No, the timing is fine. We also have some time to have a short conversation and to gracefully end the day. So if we were to take a step back and think about these kind of tools. When a team should think about it, when should it approach it? How should the team members embrace it? Whose responsibility is to think about it and say, look, there is this thing that we need to take care about. Let's have a look.
I think anybody can trigger the conversation about having tools that allow you to see what's going on with your app. Some people are expecting for the person that's called architect or some DevOps engineering team to come forward and say, hey, you need this and you should monitor this. And sometimes that approach helps. But definitely you should employ them as sooner as possible. I know that sometimes when you're starting a setup, you're starting with dev, you're having some QA, you're not very preoccupied how the big part is going to be there. You're going to scale a little bit later. You're just preoccupied to make it step by step, of course, in the beginning. But while you're making the beginning, of course, the DevOps team can work on the big picture and prepare the way for you. One way to work with these parts, I mean, if you don't want to get around Grafana and Prometheus, like worry yourself, how do you manipulate those queries there? What's the how to use those? And probably some people don't like going too much into learning tools. I mean, there are tools. Would be to talk with your colleagues that are from operations and tell them, hey, I use this, I would like to measure this. And typically measurements are there, as mentioned in the beginning, for the NFRs. They are there to satisfy the information about the system for you, your team, to know how well we're performed, but sometimes they're used for showing to the business, like, hey, look at here, we perform well, this is a great performance. I know this is not the analytics that typically people are expecting to see, but it kind of gives the confidence that to know that things are going fine, and there are things, of course, as I said, they can be used as an exchange coin to trigger the so much needed refactoring. And of course, refactoring, by the way, should not be at the end, because I've heard this many times. Refactoring is at the end. I don't know what end.
Testing and refactoring are at the end, always.
Always at the end, right? At the end of what? Because we're working agile nowadays, and like at the end of the sprint, at the end of what? So at the end, I don't know what's the end nowadays, because it doesn't seem to be an end. All the time you're just getting a new start every sprint, and with every microservice that you make, you have a new start, and every feature that you're implementing is a new start. So the end might never come, and you might never get there. So try to incorporate them down the way, not wait for a specific time or a specific problem, and see some panic people asking why this is happening and why don't we have this. And try to raise that to the business as well. Why do they need these? I mean, it's better to invest in prepare yourself, prepare your app for the worst, than expecting for the worst to happen and afterwards cry and say, yeah, we should have done that. It never, I mean, being sorry about something that happened, it never helps anybody. And I think that we are, as engineers, as IT people, we are very logical and mathematically oriented, and we can know to plan well as well. So we can help others to see from our point of view why this helps us. Probably for many, and polluting your code with more information doesn't seem that nice, but hey, I showed you some annotations, so use at least those annotations. I mean, you should love annotations. Spring has it, Quarkus has it. Everybody nowadays, I think, is around annotations, and we all love annotations, so at least use those.
Yeah, they're very, very convenient. So your suggestion is that it's never too early to think about the things and plan against.
It's never too early.
Measurement and then
better to take these things and make them ahead of time before they're really bad
and explode.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, and I like the part with annotations, because we're talking now about the ideal situation, right, or the best practice. But sometimes you're in the middle of the project and you look at these things right then, and you have already a large code base, certain infrastructure, architecture, and everything, and then you realize, hey, things are not right. So you want to start measuring and doing metrics, but then it's a hassle to plug these things in. How would you approach these situations, or what
I would approach it a little bit top down. like from the endpoint itself, because I think that when you were talking to somebody about metrics and you see that thing with the average response time, I think that's the first thing that resonates with every developer and every person. Like, I need to know how much it takes for something to respond to me. So that's the first place you want to start, with the endpoints, and see how the metrics are going on with the endpoints. Secondly, then you going in a little bit deeper into your business logic, and you're saying like, hey, we're doing this complicated manipulation of data here, like parsing whatever to this kind of thing, and then we're saving it somewhere else. Maybe it would be good to have a closer inspection to this code and see how it performs. And always, it's pretty simple to choose what you want to use from the annotations, because they kind of tell you, some are for duration, some are for counting, some are for getting a nice distribution about something. So they're pretty much really meaningful, and this is really cool for developers because they are named by what they mean to be used. And yeah, you can try to do it like that as well, but it's better not to rush. Anyway, never is too late to improve. And of course, there should be an action plan regardless of the moment where you are with implementing metrics. And some metrics are available by default. I mean, the JVM ones, they are available by default. They don't cost you development time to do more annotation. So just use that to get at least information about how JVM is performing for your apps. Also, do not forget about the metrics of infrastructure. So I talked about metrics of application level, but also metrics on infrastructure are very important as well. I mean, you need to monitor what your kube is doing as well, and how your containers are doing as well. Not just the application. Now, this was focused more on application side, but you should not forget about the infrastructure and what's running the overall app, because your metrics on your app might be really nice and really cool and really good, but maybe your setup is under provisioned for the amount of requests that are coming. I mean, yeah, and you should look at that one as well.
So Anna, should we consider this as an invitation to yet another session sometime in the future?
Well, might be. You just need to tell me how much you like this one.
Yeah, we're excited.
This one was for the one with Java. So this was for metrics that work with the Java framework. And I wanted to bring that to your attention, not to pollute too much with Kubernetes here.
All right. At Codecamp, we believe very much in the force of the community and the professional community. So you're a Java champion for many years now.
No, for 3 months.
For 3 months. For 3 months, it's good. But by the way, what's for you the Java championship, the community,
So for me, it meant like recognizing some efforts done in working with the local community in Romania, as well it meant for Vlad and Victor, who were named ahead of me. So pretty much this is it, recognizing the passion to code and to help others code Java, and to help others as well. And pretty much it means not just to help people within your company, but also help people that are outside of your company. We can always do this as developers, as professionals. We can help others regardless of our job and what we're doing in our day-to-day job. And actually, I'm really proud about our Romanian community, of how much it has grown in these years. I mean, I remember the community when I started as a developer. I'm not that old, but anyway, when I started at least, I felt a little bit like others have it, but we don't have it like this. And we have grown into having something so beautiful. And we are enriching that with many, many people and young ones that are more passionate than me, that are keen on discovering way more things than I am. So keep giving back. That's the main point. And I am here as Victor and as Vlad to enable others to give back, to encourage others to give back, to participate as speakers at events, to do meetups. Even a short amount of code or a presentation about an aspect is important to be shared, because at some point in time, it's going to help people. I myself have learned so much from conferences, and I miss in-person conferences when we could meet each other and we could have shared experiences. And we could say, yeah, that happened to me too. That went down for me too. That doesn't work for me too. That version is not good, and these stuff. These are good, Because when you're actually working with those things, you can say, hey, I talked with somebody and he or she said that this didn't work for him and her. So that's something that is definitely helping a lot of people. And I think right now a lot of people are missing this part of socializing and talking. And our community in Romania here, I think that was pretty keen on sharing and talking and exchanging ideas. So.
Yeah, definitely. But one thing though, especially after this small speech, I find it very difficult to imagine somebody that's more passionate than you.
Yes. I know at least 2 more folks that have
maybe as passionate, sure, but
and I know many more others that I hope that at some point in time they will be also named as Java champions for their communities and worldwide. Is great to see that there are so many good people that are giving back and they're investing their time, sometimes their personal time, to give back. And if you are just training a little bit yourself, in time you will see that you will not give up to something. And it's not giving up, it's actually investing in something for the future. We should always think like what we leave behind us, like what's in the future, and not just be a person that goes to work and does the job. You have to be that person as well, but always think to the bigger picture. What you're doing for the rest of the folks is important as well.
I'm not sure. Wow. Not sure if we should add anything more to that.
No, let's close the conference right now, right here, just to end the day with this feeling and with this word. So yeah, your passion is well something that I really admire, and thanks so much for being today here with us at Codecamp.
Pleasure.
And looking forward to have you
another session.
again.